Hey, you. You're finally awake.
Welcome back, everybody. While Sega's Game Gear was technically impressive handheld for its time, not every game that landed on the platform lived to its expectations. Now today we're diving deep into the dark side of the Game Gear library with 7 games that missed the mark in spectacular fashion. From broken gameplay to baffling design choices, these are just some of the worst games we've ever seen for the Sega Game Gear. As I said, this is not the definitive list, this is just 7 examples, and if you think there's ones I've missed, put them in the comments below. If you want to hear more of me, Retro Wars is a weekly podcast where we cover games we used to play back when we were kids, and you'll find that wherever you get your podcasts from. And if you want to support the show financially, you can do it at patreon.com/Retro Wars, where you can actively get involved in the show and get your own show called DLC. Right, let's get into it, shall we? 7 of the worst games for the Sega Game Gear. Star Trek: The Next Generation, Beyond the Nexus. Now, I love Star Trek, especially The Next Generation. I am a Trekkie. I am a Next Gen. My mum and dad brought me up on Star Trek, and I love it with the adventures of Jean-Luc Picard. And Star Trek fans had high hopes when Beyond the Nexus made its way to the Game Gear in 1994. Adapted from the popular TV series, the game promised space battles, diplomacy, and classic Trek storytelling. But what players got instead was a jumbled mess that left even die-hard Trekkies scratching their heads, and I have no idea what they're even doing. The game attempted to fuse several types of gameplay, involving first-person navigation through space, side-scrolling shooting, and puzzle solving. Unfortunately, none of these mechanics were implemented with any care or precision. The result was a game that was just a mess and very frustrating. Graphically, Beyond the Nexus was a disaster on the Game Gear's small screen. Space battles were reduced to pixelated blobs, and interior ship sequences were plagued by poor colour contrast and indistinguishable environments. The ambitious concept was simply too much for the hardware to handle. The story loosely follows elements from the show, but it's presented in such a fragmented way that players have no idea what's happening or why. Dialogue is reduced to static text boxes with barely any explanation, making it feel disconnected from the Star Trek universe. Just do Borg stuff, that's all you need to do. The controls are also an issue. Piloting the Enterprise is needlessly difficult, with sluggish turning and unresponsive firing. The action segments offer little in way of fun, and pacing is constantly stalled because players have no absolute idea what they're meant to be doing. Just make it easy. What's the objective? What do I need to do? Go there, solve this. Absolutely stupid. Perhaps the most unforgivable sin is the game never really has a consistent identity. It's not a good shooter, it's not a compelling story game, and it's not even a competent puzzler. It just spreads itself too thin like terrible butter. I like thick butter, not like thin little wafer bits. And because you spread yourself like terrible butter, you just don't get a good taste. Reviews at the time were scathing. Critics noted the jarring transitions between gameplay types and the poor visuals, with many concluding that it was an insult to the Star Trek license, and fans of the franchise were equally disappointed. Worse still, it had none of the charm or the complexity that made other Star Trek games successful on PC or consoles. Instead, it just felt like a cynical cash-in meant to capitalise on the show's popularity without regard for the quality. In the grand scheme of Star Trek games, Beyond the Nexus ranks near the bottom, a hollow, glitchy experience that failed to capture the heart and soul of the final frontier. I see what I did there. Home Alone. Yes, at some point Home Alone was going to make this list. Released in 1991 to capitalise on the blockbuster movie, Home Alone for the Game Gear is a prime example of rushed development with little regard for the gameplay coherence. The idea was simple: defend the house from burglars. The execution? Anything but simple. Now I'm going to make this very clear. I played the Mega Drive version and I loved it. So maybe it's just nostalgia kicking in here, so maybe I've hung off from putting this on the list for so long, but the Game Gear version will defice here. The game tasked players with collecting valuable items scattered across your house, and stashing them into a safe before the wet bandits arrive. However, the controls are so stiff and the item placement so random, this just becomes a bit of an exercise in trying not to get really annoyed and decide, nah, not today. Graphically, the game does little to impress. Backgrounds are bland, characters lack detail, animations are stiff and robotic. Kevin McAllister doesn't even look like a kid, he's just like a squashed adult sprite, it's terrible. The story is barely there, just a quick few text prompts at the beginning to establish that the burglars are coming, and that's about it. There's no cutscene, no character development, well, I'm not expecting any character development, and no nods to the film's humour or personality. Gameplay involves running up and down the stairs, dodging enemies, and trying to outpace a timer. Unfortunately, this just feels terrible, and there's no sense of what you're meant to be doing. One glaring flaw is the lack of a save system with proper level structure. The whole game feels just like a looping nightmare of hallways and objects with no clear goals, then just don't fail. Critics panned this version, and it was frequently compared unfavourably to other versions of Home Alone, which at least attempted to be entertaining. And players just felt cheated. I'd feel cheated. A beloved film that turned into a bland, joyless task simulator with no trace of the charm that made Kevin's antics so iconic. It's the kind of game that makes you want to leave the house unattended. Over time, the Game Gear version of Home Alone has become something of a joke among retro gamers, and it's often cited in the worst licensed games on handhelds, and it's easy to see why. As a representation of a classic holiday film, it fails, and as a video game, it barely qualifies. It's a digital equivalent of a forgotten Christmas gift, cheap, rushed, and easily broken. Rise of the Robots. Well, let's mention this thing again, shall we? We did it previously. When Rise of the Robots came to the Game Gear in 1994, it brought with it the stench of overhype. The original versions on consoles and PC were marketed as the future of fighting games, but as we know, it's absolutely terrible. So what do you think the Game Gear version is going to look like? Well, it is a tragic pixelated shell of an already terrible experience. The game's plot follows on the evil AI called the Supervisor, which takes over a robotics facility, and it's up to the cyborg hero ECO-35-2 to fight through the robotic ranks. It's a cheesy, overly self-serious premise, and on a Game Gear it's barely explained. The story is just relegated to one or two clunky text messages, and that's about it. The graphics, oh my god, the graphics are abysmal. Like, they actually tried to develop it and actually put this as the priority, but on the Game Gear, it just looks so bad. And, look, God bless them, they tried, let's just say that. The combat is absolutely abysmal, and that's a shame, because it's a fighting game, and that needs to be the core. As with the other versions, there's only one playable character, ECO-35-2, and every fight just plays out the same. The controls, well, what do you expect them to be? They're absolutely terrible. Pulling off moves feels like wrestling with the D-pad, and the hit detection is laughably inconsistent. Sometimes an attack will actually go straight through an enemy, and other times you'll get knocked out in seconds with no explanation of what's going on. The soundtrack here is absolutely appalling. Like, I was actually trying to find something for this game, and it was good luck. Critics tore this apart. Already hated on consoles and PC, the Game Gear version didn't even have a chance, and it was seen as the worst iteration. Similar to the console versions, reviewers highlighted the lack of playable characters, dreadful controls, and the sheer monotony as reasons to stay clear. Can you imagine if you got this on Christmas Day as a present? Oh no. Like, your parents probably thought, oh, this looks like a really cool game. Like, the console versions look okay, but I've got a cheaper version. Let's go get the Game Gear version. Oh god, poor mum and dad. Oh, you've definitely been duped. As always, Rise of the Robots is remembered as one of gaming's most overhyped failures, and the Game Gear version is probably the worst of them all. It's cold, ugly, and lifeless. A cyberpunk snooze fest that completely malfunctions. Sonic Drift. Yes, look, I put Sonic Drift on here. You all attacked me for Sonic R, okay? And I can see the justification in that. You can allow to come after me. It's not a problem. I'm a big boy. I can take these things. I like criticism. It's all good fun. But Sonic Drift, I'm sorry. Sonic Drift is... no, it's just boring. Like, you'd think it'd be a guaranteed hit. After all, he's the fastest person alive. But Sonic Drift, released in 1994, exclusively in Japan, we did get it in later versions, proved that even Sega's blue mascot could stumble hard. Now, this was the answer to Super Mario Kart, placing Sonic and friends in go-karts across themed tracks. Like, it had potential, it really did, but the execution was severely limited by the Game Gear's technical capabilities and questionable design choices. The graphics are bright, give it that, but very simplistic. The tracks, however, are very poorly designed. You have to look at me at this and go, yes, I agree. With minimal design and a strange perspective that makes it hard to see turns or hazards coming. You literally need Jedi reaction sometimes. Or you just have to look at the map, because you've got no way of doing it just by the screen. Every course just felt flat and uninspired, despite being named after iconic Sonic zones. The controls are also a nightmare. Steering is slippery, acceleration feels sluggish, and it's almost impossible to recover from a crash. Now, the game moves fast, but not in a fun and controlled way. Instead, it constantly feels like you're fighting the track, hence why you have to keep looking at the map. Power-ups do exist, but barely functional. Use a ring to attack an enemy or activate a boost doesn't offer any excitement. And the game never explains how to really use them, although saying that, that's what the guidebook's for. It's all trial and error. Critics panned Sonic Drift for being too simplistic and frustrating to play. While it did feature fan favourites like Sonic, Tails, Amy and Dr. Robotnik, none of them handled uniquely enough to justify multiple playthroughs. Even Sonic fans who could usually find enjoyment in mediocre games, and Sonic's had a few of them, were left disappointed. Sonic Drift felt like a cash grab with Sonic's name slapped onto the bare bones racer, and that's the problem, it's just bare bones. Like, maybe you can get over some of the things, but it's just bare bones and you're like, meh, I'd rather play Mario Kart quickly. The game's legacy, it doesn't really hold up. It was followed by Sonic Drift 2, which got a lot more characters, but the original remains a glaring reminder that you should have waited. You could have done it better. Like, imagine if it was on the Mega Drive, it could have been a really good game. Yeah, I know we had Sonic Races later on, which were much better, but this was just, should have done it on the Mega Drive. Ultimately, Sonic Drift just fails in the worst possible way. It's boring, slow, and misses the point of both Sonic and racing games. Popeye Beach Volleyball. Now, Popeye Beach Volleyball is one of the strange licensed games that feels like a joke that somehow got published. Released only in Japan in 1984, it features the classic Popeye cast facing off in 2-on-2 volleyball matches. What could go wrong? Well, apparently everything. Like, who thought this was a good idea? We need a new Popeye game. Why need a new Popeye game? Because everyone loves Popeye. Do they? Yes. Is it just you? Maybe. So what have you got for me? A volleyball game. Are you joking? No, I'm not. Who wants a volleyball game? Me. I want to see Olive Oil in just her stuff. No, go home. You're fired. That's what it should have been. There's no real story here. It's just Popeye and his friends participating in a volleyball tournament. Okay, fine. That's what we want to be. The visuals are basic and tiny, with squash sprites that look more like generic stick figures than cartoon characters. The backgrounds are dull and repetitive, with each beach court feeling lifeless and identical. Gameplay is just slow. Characters move sluggishly and take forever to respond to button inputs. Hitting the ball feels like a chore, and the timing's so off, it's hard to tell if you're even playing this correctly. And there's barely any depth to the mechanic. You can serve, bump, and spike, and that's about it. I don't know what else you were expecting. Mega power meters? No, that wasn't here. Reviews were rare due to its limited release, but among the import players, the game quickly gained a reputation for just being unplayable. Most agreed it was a waste of a license and barely qualified as a sports game. And even Popeye fans couldn't defend it. The character design, humour, and charm of the cartoons were completely absent, replaced by robotic movements and awkward animations. Over time, Popeye Beach Volleyball became a curious footnote in the Popeye franchise. A weird, undercooked oddity that only remembered how bad it was. There's definitely a space for volleyball games, look at Dead or Alive. But this isn't it, I'm afraid. It's one of those games you play once, laugh in disbelief, and never touch again. Phantasy Star Giden. Now, Phantasy Star series was a shiny beacon of the early console RPGs. Definitely we talked about that on the Master System. So when Phantasy Star Giden arrived on the Game Gear in 1992, fans were hopeful. Unfortunately, what they got was a watered-down, aimless side story that offered none of the depth or polish of the main series. Now, this is set between Phantasy Star 2 and 3, and the game tells a story of a girl named Minia, and her journey with Alec, a mysterious warrior. Now, while it sounds interesting, the plot is poorly paced and lazily told, with minimal world building or character development. Graphically, the game is passable for a Game Gear RPG, but it's just bland compared to its console counterparts. Environments are drab, dungeons are repetitive, and the character sprites are painfully basic. Combat is turn-based, but extremely simplistic, and battles just feel like a grind fest with very little tactical depth. Enemies are generic and the encounter rates are far too high, turning exploration into a slog, and we don't like games with high encounter rates, that just kind of ruins it all. Menus are clunky, item management awkward, and navigating towns a chore. And what makes it worse is very little guidance here, which leaves players wondering aimlessly going, what the hell do I do? Critics and import reviewers are unimpressed. Many considered it one of the weakest RPGs on the Game Gear, citing poor pacing, lack of innovation, and tedious gameplay. And for a long time, Phantasy Star fans, it was a disappointment. The series' reputation for strong stories and interesting worlds was absent here, replaced with lazy design and filler content. And that's a shame really, because Phantasy Star is seen as one of Sega's best IPs, and to have it just abused like that is shocking, to be honest, and it kind of makes me feel I want to play this game to see how bad it was. The game since has faded into obscurity, rarely mentioned outside the niche fan circles. It's not even considered so bad it's good Snake on a Plane level, it's just unnecessary and dull. Phantasy Star Giden is the perfect example of how a great franchise can stumble if you don't put the love and care into it. And finally, Panza Dragoon Mini. The original Panza Dragoon on the Sega Saturn was a cult classic, apparently so, I'm not even looking at that. It was cinematic, moody, and packed with thrilling rail shooter action. But Panzer Dragoon Mini, released in 1996 for the Game Gear, stripped away everything that made the original special, allegedly. In this bizarre spin-off, you no longer play as a human rider on a dragon, but rather as the dragon itself. completely removing the series' narrative depth and personality. Worse, the dragons are chibi-fied and cartoonish, making it feel a parody of the original. The visuals are as bad as it can be, just look at what I'm showing you now. Enemies and backgrounds just blur together with colour palettes that make it difficult to see oncoming threats. What was once an atmospheric journey through haunting skies is now a chaotic, unrecognisable mess. Gameplay is reduced to the barest bones of a rail shooter. You move your dragon across the screen to dodge and shoot, but there's almost no variety in enemy patterns, level design or weapons, and every stage just feels like a copy and paste of the last. The sluggish controls don't really help, and the Game Gear's screen makes precision aiming nearly impossible. You'll get hit by projectiles you couldn't see, and combine that with a horrendous frame rate and it's an unplayable mess. There's no voice acting, which I wasn't really expecting, no story sequences and barely any music. Gone is that cinematic score and the world building of the original, and Mini offers only silence and repetition. The reception at the time was poor, and the game's limited release didn't help its case. Critics just felt it was a lazy spin-off designed only to cash in on the Panza Dragoon name before the Saturn faded. Fans of the original were absolutely appalled, and instead of expanding the world or offering a new perspective, Mini just shrank the experience of a soulless gimmick that insulted the franchise legacy. To this day, Panzer Dragoon Mini is considered one of the worst, if not the worst game on the Game Gear, and is often considered the black sheep in an otherwise respected series. It's a game that should have never existed, a toothless dragon that forgot how to fly. And that's it, 7 of the worst games for the Sega Game Gear. As I always say, all the ones I've missed are the ones that need to be talked about. Put them in the comments below. And if you think I've deserved it, please leave a like and subscribe for more content. My name's been Danny, and I'll see you again in 3 days. You all take care of yourself. Bye bye.